The war was finally over. The sky above the planet Vora 9 still burned in shades of red and gray, filled with drifting smoke and the distant sound of collapsing metal. The once busy colonies now lay silent, broken, and empty. Only the smell of burned air and melted steel remained, a smell no one could ever forget. Among the ruins walked a tired human soldier named Ryan. His armor was scratched, his rifle heavy and his face covered in dust. The battle had ended days ago, but the cries for help still echoed from hidden corners of the destroyed city. Ryan wasn't sure why he was still searching. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was duty, or maybe it was just something inside humans that refused to leave others behind. The ground cracked beneath his boots as he moved through the wreckage. His radio had gone silent hours ago, and his team had already been evacuated. Yet he stayed, sweeping his flashlight across the dark ruins. Every few steps he stopped and listened, to wind, to metal, to silence. Then he heard it, a sound that didn't belong in a battlefield. Soft at first, then louder. A cry. High-pitched, trembling, full of pain and fear, the cry of a baby. Ryan froze. His heart skipped. A baby? Here? He turned off his radio and listened again. The sound came from beneath a half-collapsed transport vehicle, its metal body twisted like paper. Without thinking, he ran toward it, pushing away debris with his gloved hands. The cry grew louder as he got closer. Hold on, he shouted, his voice shaking. I'm coming. The smell of burned plastic filled his nose. The heat from the wreck was still strong, but Ryan didn't stop. Using a piece of metal as a lever, he forced open a small gap and crawled inside. Inside the dim wreckage, he saw something glowing faintly blue. A small pod, cracked on one side. Inside the pod was a baby, tiny and trembling, its skin a pale silver color, its eyes large and bright like polished glass. Beside it lay an alien woman trapped under fallen beams, blood running down her forehead. She was still alive, barely. Ryan's heart raced. She was clearly not human. Her face was smooth, her hair shining like white silk, and her breathing weak. But the baby was crying so hard it hurt to listen. Ryan dropped his weapon and crawled forward. Hey, it's okay, he said softly, even though he knew they might not understand his words. The woman stirred. Her eyes opened, glowing faintly violet. She looked at him with confusion and fear. Man, she whispered in a weak, trembling voice. Yes, Ryan said quickly. Human, I'm not here to hurt you. I'll help. She blinked slowly, her voice cracked as she said, My baby, please, he won't stop. He can't feel my warmth anymore. Ryan didn't fully understand, but the emotion in her tone was clear. Pain, fear, and love. He looked at the beam crushing her leg. He needed to move fast. He used his strength to lift the beam just enough to pull her free. She cried out, but Ryan didn't stop until she was safe beside her child. He tore open his emergency pack, found a medical patch, and placed it on her wound. The patch hissed softly as it sealed the bleeding. You'll be okay, he said, breathing heavily. You and your baby both. The woman's eyes softened. Thank you, she whispered. Ryan turned to the child. The baby's eyes were full of tears, its small hands reaching toward the air as if searching for something invisible. Its cries grew weaker, more desperate. Ryan looked around. No working machines, no power, no help coming. It was just them in this cold, broken place. He tried giving the child water from his canteen. Nothing. He searched the pod for food, nothing there either. The baby continued crying, its voice echoing through the wreckage like a wound that wouldn't close. Ryan sighed, wiping his face with a dirty hand. All right, little one, he murmured. I've faced plasma storms and space beasts, but I guess this is tougher. He took off one of his gloves and reached out slowly. The baby's silver skin looked soft, glowing faintly under his touch. When his warm human hand touched the baby's cold arm, something strange happened. The crying stopped. The baby blinked, staring at him quietly. Ryan froze, his breath caught. Then the tiny alien hand reached out and grabbed his finger. Silence. Complete silence. Even the broken wind outside seemed to calm down. The alien woman gasped. Her glowing eyes widened as she whispered something in her language, then looked at Ryan in awe. He stopped, she said softly. He feels you. Ryan smiled, though he was still confused. Feels me? She nodded weakly. He Feels hearts, emotions, our kind. We are connected through feeling. He could not feel my warmth anymore, so he cried. But you are calm, gentle. He feels that. Ryan looked down at the baby in his arms. The small creature was now quiet, looking up at him with curious eyes that reflected tiny lights like stars. For the first time since the war began, Ryan felt peace. He rocked the baby slowly. Guess we're not so different after all, huh? The alien woman smiled faintly, exhaustion in her face. Humans, she whispered. Always unpredictable. Ryan chuckled softly. Yeah, we get that a lot. He sat beside her, holding the baby carefully as it drifted to sleep. For a few minutes, the ruined battlefield didn't exist. There was no war, no hate, just a tired soldier, a wounded mother, and a small life that somehow connected two enemies in silence. Outside, lightning flashed across the red clouds, but inside the wreck, the light from the baby's skin softly illuminated their faces. The woman watched Ryan carefully. Why did you save us? She asked, her voice weak but curious. Ryan looked at her for a long moment before answering. Because you needed help, he said simply. That's what we do. The woman blinked, confused. Even your enemies? Ryan nodded slowly. Especially them. If we only help friends, then peace will never come. The alien woman didn't reply, but her eyes softened again. You are strange, she said gently. Your kind fights with such fire, but your hearts are soft. Ryan smirked. We call it balance. For a moment, they both laughed, a sound that felt strange and beautiful in a place filled with ruins. Hours passed. Ryan made a small shelter from debris, started a low-heat fire, and kept the baby warm with his jacket. The alien woman, whose name he finally learned was Mira, rested quietly, watching her child sleep peacefully for the first time since the war began. Before falling asleep, she whispered, Human, Ryan, you saved more than my life today. You saved my hope. Ryan didn't reply immediately. He just sat there, looking at the stars through a gap in the roof. Maybe that's what humans are for, he said quietly. Saving hope. When Mira closed her eyes, Ryan checked his communicator again, still no signal. He looked at the baby, who was now sleeping peacefully on his chest. He smiled slightly. Guess it's just you and me for now, little one. The night went silent again, but it no longer felt lonely. The sound of breathing and one human, one alien, one child filled the darkness with quiet peace. And somewhere in that broken world, a small spark of understanding was born. Ryan didn't know it yet, but that single moment, that simple act of kindness, would change the future of two species forever. When morning came to the broken planet of Vora 9, the sunlight was weak and pale, shining through gray dust clouds. The city around the ruins looked like a graveyard of steel. But inside a small, half-collapsed shelter, life still stirred. Ryan opened his eyes slowly. He had fallen asleep sitting against the cold wall, his jacket wrapped around the small alien baby that now slept peacefully in his arms. For a moment, he didn't move. He just listened. No crying, no explosions, just quiet breathing. It felt strange. Peace was something he had almost forgotten. Mira, the alien woman, was awake too. She watched Ryan carefully, her eyes calm but thoughtful. Her wound had mostly healed overnight thanks to the human medical patch. Her silver skin had regained a bit of its glow. Good morning, Ryan said softly, his voice rough from fatigue. Mira nodded, her tone gentle. Your world's words. They sound simple, kind. Ryan smiled faintly. Simple is good. Complicated words don't stop wars. She tilted her head, studying him. You speak as one who has seen too many. Maybe, he said, adjusting his jacket around the baby. I've been through 3 planets worth of fighting. Lost too many friends. Guess I just wanted to make something right before going home. Mira's gaze softened. She looked down at her baby, now quiet and warm. You already did. He feels peace because of you. Ryan looked puzzled. You said something yesterday, that he feels hearts. What does that mean? Mira hesitated for a moment before speaking. Our kind, the Varniks, were born with a sense that connects us. We feel emotion, energy, life. It is our way of understanding truth. My son's ability is stronger than most. But when the war started, all he felt was fear, hatred, and pain. That is why he cried. His heart could not rest in a world filled with anger. Ryan nodded slowly. So when I held him, he felt something different. Yes, Mira said, watching him with quiet wonder. He felt warmth. You carry calm inside you, human. Even in chaos, you think of others. Ryan looked down, slightly embarrassed. I'm no saint, Mira. I just did what anyone should do. Mira shook her head slowly. No, many would have walked away, many did. You stayed. They sat in silence for a moment. The baby shifted in his sleep, making a small sound that almost made Ryan laugh. It was such an ordinary, gentle sound, strange for a battlefield. He carefully passed the child to Mira. Here, he needs his mother more than me. But the moment the baby left his arms, it began to whimper again, a soft cry that grew louder with each second. Mira tried to calm him, humming in her native tongue, but the crying didn't stop. Ryan sighed and extended his arms again. All right, come here, little troublemaker. The baby reached toward him, and as soon as Ryan held him, the crying stopped again. The child looked up with bright silver eyes, completely calm. Mira blinked in amazement. He has chosen you, she said quietly. Chosen me? Yes. The young of our kind rarely bond outside our species. But he feels your energy as his own now. To him, you are family. Ryan froze, unsure how to respond. Family? That's unexpected, Mira smiled faintly. Perhaps fate brought you here. Ryan chuckled softly. Or maybe fate just has a strange sense of humor. The light outside grew brighter. Ryan stood and walked to the entrance, scanning the horizon with his visor. He could see small smoke trails rising, ships, maybe search teams. But he didn't know if they were human or Varnics. He turned back to Mira. Anyone coming for you? He asked. Mira's eyes darkened. Perhaps. But I do not know if they come to rescue, or to finish what was started. Ryan frowned. What do you mean? Mira hesitated. I am not just any woman, Ryan. My child is the heir to the Varnics' throne. Ryan's breath caught. He looked at her in shock. Your royalty? She nodded slowly. I was once called Empress Mira. But when the war came, our leaders divided. I fled to save my son from those who wanted him as a weapon. Ryan felt his heart sink. A weapon? He's just a baby. To you, yes, Mira said sadly. But his gift, to sense emotion, could be turned into a tool for control. If one can feel the hearts of others, they can also learn how to break them. Ryan clenched his jaw. That's terrible. Mira nodded, her voice calm but full of pain. That is why we ran. But the war reached us anyway. And now here we are. Alive because a human soldier heard a cry. Ryan looked at the baby again. The small child blinked up at him with curious eyes, reaching for his face. Ryan smiled despite himself. Well, little one, you sure found the right mess to be born into. Mira smiled softly. His name is Leon, she said. It means light from within in my language. Leon, Ryan repeated. Nice name. Fits him. For the next few hours, they stayed in the shelter. Ryan shared some of his ration packs with Mira, and though she found the taste strange, she accepted with quiet gratitude. They spoke in simple words, sometimes just gestures, but somehow they understood each other perfectly. When the baby slept again, Mira asked quietly, Do you believe the war will end now? Ryan looked at the floor. Wars never really end. They just stop until the next one starts. But maybe this one can end differently. Mira tilted her head. Because of you? Ryan smiled a little. Because of us. Humans, aliens, whoever, we're all tired. Maybe one small act of kindness is enough to start something better. Outside, the wind carried the sound of distant engines. Ryan stood quickly, grabbing his rifle. Someone's coming. Mira's body tensed. Can you tell who? He adjusted the scanner on his wrist. The signal showed 3 ships approaching fast. They're not human. Energy signatures match your people. Mira closed her eyes. Then they found me. Ryan looked back at her, his expression serious. If they think I captured you, they might attack. Then you must go, Mira said. If they see you, they'll kill you. Ryan shook his head. Not leaving you or the baby. I didn't come this far to walk away now. Mira's eyes widened. Why risk your life for someone you just met? Ryan's voice was calm but firm. Because life doesn't need a reason. It just needs a choice. Outside, the sound of engines grew louder. Dust swirled as 3 Varnics hovercraft landed nearby. Soldiers in silver armor stepped out, their weapons glowing faintly blue. They surrounded the area, scanning for threats. Ryan raised his hand slowly, keeping the baby hidden behind him. One of the soldiers shouted something in the Varnics language. Mira stood weakly but tall. "Stop," she cried. "He is with me." The soldiers froze, then quickly bowed their heads. "Your Majesty," one said in their tongue. Ryan looked confused, but Mira's calm voice cut through the tension. "This human saved my life, and the life of the heir." The soldiers looked uncertain. One of them said something in protest, pointing at Ryan. Mira silenced him with a glance. If not for him, the heir would be dead. "Remember that." The soldier bowed again, lowering his weapon. Ryan slowly lowered his arms, unsure what to do. Mira turned to him. "It is safe now. They will not harm you." Ryan gave a short laugh. "You sure about that? They don't look too happy." "They follow orders," Mira said softly. "And my orders are clear." The soldiers began to prepare a transport. Mira stepped closer to Ryan, holding Leon gently. The baby reached out for him again, tiny fingers curling toward his face. Ryan let him grab his hand one last time. Mira looked at him with gratitude. "There are no words in any language for what you did." Ryan smiled faintly. "You don't need words." As the soldiers helped her aboard the transport, Ryan stood watching. The engines started to hum, lifting slowly. Mira held the baby close, her eyes still fixed on the human who had changed everything. Before the ship rose, she spoke through the open ramp, her voice clear. "Ryan, one day if peace returns, you will always have a place among us." Ryan nodded silently. "Take care of him, Mira. Take care of both of you." The ship lifted off, leaving Ryan alone in the dust. He stood there long after it disappeared into the clouds, the echo of the engines fading away. He looked at the empty sky and smiled sadly. "Guess I'm better with babies than politics," he muttered to himself. Then he turned and walked back into the ruins, unaware that his small act of compassion had just begun a story that would echo through both worlds for generations. The next few days passed in quiet uncertainty. The war had ended, but peace had not yet begun. Ryan was back at the human base on Vora 9, or what was left of it. The place was mostly metal walls and burned tents, patched together by tired engineers and soldiers who no longer knew what victory meant. He sat in the medical bay, his arm in a sling from an old wound that had reopened. Around him, machines beeped softly and the air smelled faintly of antiseptic. Outside the window, ships came and went, carrying supplies, refugees, and reports of ruined cities. But Ryan's thoughts were far away. He could still hear the soft cry of the alien baby, still remember the way it had stopped when he held it. That moment had carved itself deep into his heart. When the door opened, Ryan looked up. His commanding officer, Captain Reynolds, stepped inside. The man's uniform was clean, his tone sharp, but his eyes were tired. "Soldier," he said, "we need to talk." Ryan stood. "Yes, sir." Reynolds placed a tablet on the table and tapped it. A hologram appeared. It showed a video from a drone camera. Ryan holding the alien child, speaking to the woman, the arrival of the Varnic soldiers, and their departure. Ryan's chest tightened. "You recorded that?" "Not me, the drones did." "You were inside a restricted zone," Reynolds said. "We thought you were dead. Then we saw that." Ryan didn't answer. The captain folded his arms. "You helped an alien, an enemy. And not just any alien. Our intelligence confirms she was Empress Mira of the Varnix Empire." Ryan nodded slowly. "Yes, sir." "And her child," Reynolds continued. "The Varnix heir, alive because of you." Ryan's voice was calm. "That's right." Reynolds sighed and leaned back. "Do you realize what this means, soldier? You could be charged with assisting an enemy leader." Ryan looked him straight in the eyes. "With respect, sir, I didn't help an enemy. I helped a mother and her child." Reynolds studied him for a long time, then turned off the hologram. "You know, some of the higher officers want to make you a hero. Others want to call it treason. I haven't decided which side I'm on yet." Ryan didn't speak. He had no desire to argue or defend himself. He just remembered the peace in the baby's eyes. That was enough. Finally, the captain sighed again. "You'll stay here until command decides what to do with you. No missions, no comms." "That's an order?" Ryan nodded quietly. "Understood, sir." When Reynolds left, the room felt colder. Ryan sat back down, staring at his hands. The same hands that had lifted a child out of the wreckage. The same hands that might now end his career. But deep inside, he didn't regret it. 2 days later, something unexpected happened. A ship arrived at the base, not a human one. It was smaller, rounder, marked with strange silver patterns that shimmered in the sunlight. The soldiers on the ground went on alert, weapons raised. But before they could fire, a message came through the comms. Peaceful contact, request to land. Captain Reynolds ordered the landing zone secured. Ryan watched from a distance as the alien vessel touched down softly. The air shimmered as the hatch opened, and 3 tall figures stepped out, Varnic's envoys, their silver armor gleaming. The human soldiers looked uneasy, but the aliens made no move to fight. One of them held a small crystal in his hands, glowing faintly blue. Ryan's name echoed over the loudspeakers. Private Ryan, report to the landing zone. He walked forward slowly, his boots crunching on the metal ramp. Every eye turned toward him, human and alien alike. The leading envoy stepped forward and spoke in calm, clear English. Human soldier Ryan, the envoy said, bowing slightly. By the command of Her Majesty Empress Mira of Varnix, we come with gratitude. Ryan blinked in surprise. Gratitude? Yes, the envoy said. You saved the life of the royal child, Leon. The Empress sends this message. He held out the glowing crystal. When Ryan took it, the crystal projected a small light. A holographic image of Mira appeared, standing in a bright hall with her child in her arms. Her voice filled the air. Ryan, when I left, I feared we would never meet again. But I want you to know your kindness was not forgotten. The Varnix people have declared a ceasefire, and our leaders speak of peace with humanity. You gave us that chance. The hologram faded, leaving everyone silent. Captain Reynolds looked at Ryan, stunned. The soldiers around them lowered their weapons slowly. For the first time, the tension between human and alien soldiers softened. The envoy continued. The Empress also sends this. He handed Ryan a small silver pendant shaped like a star with 2 circles, one blue, one gold, entwined at the center. This is a symbol of unity, the envoy said. A mark of peace between our worlds. Ryan stared at it, unsure what to say. Finally, he nodded and whispered, Thank you. The envoy smiled faintly. No, human. We thank you. Then the Varnix bowed again, returned to their ship, and lifted off into the sky. That evening, the base felt different. Soldiers who once cursed the Varnix now talked quietly about the message. Some even smiled. The war that had stolen years of their lives now seemed to have a reason to truly end. Ryan sat alone on the edge of the landing platform, watching the sunset. The pendant hung around his neck, glowing faintly in the fading light. Captain Reynolds walked up beside him. You know, he said, Command just sent a message. The Varnix Council requested an official peace talk. They mentioned your name in the document. Ryan looked at him, surprised. My name? Reynolds nodded. Seems you're something of a legend now. The human who stopped a war by holding a baby. Ryan laughed quietly. That sounds ridiculous. Maybe, Reynolds said, but it's true. Sometimes big changes start small. Ryan looked down at the pendant again. I didn't do it to be remembered, sir. I just couldn't walk away. Reynolds nodded. That's exactly why they'll remember you. The captain walked away, leaving Ryan alone with his thoughts. As the stars began to appear, Ryan looked up at the sky. Somewhere out there on another world, Mira and Leon were alive, building something new. And for the first time in a long while, Ryan felt that maybe humanity could be more than just survivors. Maybe they could be builders of peace too. Weeks passed. The war officially ended. Treaties were signed. And across both human and Varnix worlds, a story began to spread. A story that grew with every retelling. It said, when the fires of war had burned everything, one human soldier found an enemy child and held him close. The child stopped crying and the stars began to heal. Some called it myth. Others called it history. But to Ryan, it was simply memory. He was transferred to a small colony far from the front lines, a peaceful post with no battles, no orders to fight. He didn't mind. He preferred the quiet now. Every night he would sit under the open sky, the silver pendant around his neck catching the light of distant stars. Sometimes he would close his eyes and imagine the faint sound of a baby's laughter. Leon's laughter, echoing somewhere across the galaxy. It reminded him that no act of kindness was ever too small. One night, as Ryan was walking through the quiet outpost, a new ship arrived, unmarked, glowing softly in the moonlight. A small figure stepped out, wrapped in a gray cloak. Ryan's hand went to his sidearm, but the figure raised a hand peacefully. When the cloak fell back, Ryan froze. It was Mira. Her face was tired but bright, her silver eyes warm. Behind her stood a small child, Leon, now walking on his own, still with those glowing eyes that had once cried endlessly. "Mira?" Ryan whispered. "You're here?" She smiled. "Peace talks are complete. The Varnix Council wanted me to speak to human leaders. But before that, I came to see you." Ryan felt a strange wave of warmth in his chest. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," Mira said softly. "You gave me more than life. You gave me faith in what both our worlds could be." Leon looked up at Ryan, eyes bright with joy. He reached out his small hand. "Oh man," he said, his voice clear and soft. Ryan knelt and took the boy's hand, smiling. "Hey there, little one. You remember me?" Leon giggled, a sound that echoed like a melody through the quiet night. Mira's eyes glistened. "He does. He still feels your heart." Ryan looked at them both and said quietly, "Then I guess I'll keep it open." They stood together under the starlit sky, a soldier, an empress and a child, proof that even in a galaxy scarred by war, a single act of compassion could change everything. And somewhere in the silence between worlds, humanity earned a new name, not conquerors, not survivors, but healers. The Varnix and human delegates gathered on the neutral planet of Saren 4, a peaceful world of silver forests and blue rivers. Its surface was untouched by war, and its skies shimmered with calm light. Ryan walked beside Mira and Leon as they approached the summit hall. Leon walked slowly, holding Mira's hand, his small eyes bright and curious. Even after weeks of peace, the child's ability to sense emotions remained strong. Whenever he touched someone, Ryan could see the subtle shifts in their energy, calm, fear, or hostility, and it reminded him how fragile this truce really was. Inside the summit hall, humans and Varnix leaders sat across from one another, tension thick in the air. Ryan stayed in the background, acting as a guard, though he was hardly needed. Mira held Leon in her arms, presenting him to the council as a symbol of hope. "Peace," she said softly, her voice carrying across the room, "is not just a choice. It is a responsibility, and it begins with understanding." A murmur ran through the room. Humans exchanged cautious glances with Varnix delegates. The air was heavy with distrust, but Leon, calm in his mother's arms, seemed to bring an invisible light into the space. One Varnix counselor, a tall woman with sharp silver eyes, spoke up. "How can we trust humans? They have fought our people for centuries. How can we believe this soldier, this human, is anything but a tool?" Ryan stepped forward. He held his hands up in a calm gesture. "I'm not a tool. I'm a human. And humans have the choice to do good, even when it's difficult." The counselor's eyes narrowed. "Words are easy. Actions are harder. How do we know you are not just trying to gain favor?" Ryan looked directly at her, unwavering. "I held a child in my arms. I saved a life because it was the right thing to do. Nothing else mattered. Not power, not fame, not victory. Just a life. That's the action." Mira nodded in agreement. "It is true. Ryan's act has changed more than one life. It has started to change hearts. That is why Leon is calm. He feels hope, not fear. That is why you must listen." The counselor studied him and then glanced at Leon. The child's small hand reached out to Ryan instinctively. Even the skeptical Varnix could see that something extraordinary had happened. Perhaps we are ready to listen," the counselor said after a pause. But not everyone in the hall was ready. Outside, hidden behind the trees of Saren 4, a small group of Varnix extremists watched through surveillance devices. Their faces were cold, expressions filled with hate. They had not forgotten the war, and they could not accept that their empire would make peace with humans. One of them, a male named Corin, whispered, "This human. He will destroy everything we fought for. He must not leave this planet alive," another muttered. "And the child, the heir, he cannot be allowed to live under human influence. If we destroy him, we regain the future of Varnix." Corin's hand went to a small weapon. "Then tonight we act." Back inside the summit hall, the day continued. Human and Varnix leaders discussed trade, borders, and shared technology. Ryan stayed close to Mira, watching her every move, ready to act if anything went wrong. Leon, curious about the humans, toddled toward a small table of crystals used in communication experiments. Ryan followed quickly, scooping him up. "Careful, little one," he said softly. The baby looked at Ryan and laughed, a sound that echoed like a tiny bell. It made everyone around pause. Even the human delegates, exhausted from endless debates, smiled. This is what peace looks like, Mira whispered to Ryan. A moment like this, where fear is replaced by trust. Ryan nodded, looking at Leon. Sometimes, it takes just one small heart to remind everyone what matters. Night came and the summit hall grew quiet. Most delegates retired to their quarters. Ryan patrolled the corridors, his rifle ready but relaxed. Leon slept in Mira's arms, wrapped in a soft blanket. But the peace of night was fragile. Outside the perimeter, the extremists moved silently. Corin and his group had infiltrated the base's outer defenses, avoiding patrols with careful planning. Inside, Ryan noticed a faint hum, unusual energy readings on his scanner. He frowned. Something's off, he muttered. He motioned for a nearby guard. Check the outer doors quietly, don't let anyone notice. The guard nodded and left. Ryan remained near Mira, eyes scanning the dark hallways. A sudden noise made him freeze, a soft metallic click. He turned quickly and saw a shadow move across the wall. Instinct took over. Ryan raised his rifle. Who's there? He demanded. No answer. Only silence. Moments later, the extremists struck. Alarms blared, lights flashed red, and the summit hall erupted into chaos. Humans and Varnix guards rushed to respond. Ryan immediately pulled Mira behind him, shielding Leon with his body. Corin's voice rang out through the chaos. The air must not live under human influence. Ryan didn't hesitate. He moved quickly, using his training to block attacks, guide Mira, and keep Leon safe. Each time an extremist approached, the baby seemed to sense the danger and cried. But the sound was not just fear. It carried a resonance of human courage, strengthening Ryan's resolve. Mira shouted, her voice cutting through the alarms. Ryan, follow me. Together, they moved through hidden corridors she knew from when she first arrived on the planet. Ryan carried Lee and Mira beside him, while guards and delegates tried to fight off the attackers. The group reached a small observation deck overlooking the blue rivers of Seren 4. It was high, isolated, and difficult to access. Ryan set Leon down on a low railing, keeping one hand on him. The baby looked up at him, eyes wide but calm. You all right, little one? Ryan whispered. Leon nodded slightly, reaching out his tiny hand. Mira looked at Ryan with gratitude. Your presence, it protects him. Ryan smiled faintly. I guess some things don't need weapons to work. Below, the extremists regrouped, preparing to breach the deck. Ryan could see Corin's expression, anger, frustration, disbelief, that a single human soldier had survived every attempt. Then Leon did something unexpected. The baby raised his hand slightly, looking directly at Corin. Ryan felt a sudden warmth radiating from the child, a small wave of calm and strength. It was subtle, but enough to make the attackers hesitate. Little one, Ryan whispered, awe in his voice. Mira nodded. He is sensing them. Not their weapons. Their hearts. He knows they will not succeed. Ryan took a deep breath. Then let's make sure they don't. With skill and determination, he led the retreat, using the layout of the building to their advantage. Guards moved efficiently, blocking paths, while Ryan and Mira focused on protecting Leon. Every time the baby cried, Ryan felt renewed energy, as if the child's calm and courage were feeding into him. By the time reinforcements arrived from the summit, the extremists were contained. None of the delegates were harmed, and the attackers were captured. Corin's group glared, frustrated, realizing that one human soldier and one small child had thwarted their plans. When the danger passed, the summit hall was quiet again. Mira hugged Leon tightly, whispering soft words of comfort. Ryan leaned against the wall, exhausted but alive. You saved us again, Mira said softly. Ryan shook his head. You saved him too. I just followed. Leon looked up at Ryan, tiny hand reaching out instinctively. Ryan took it gently. We're a team, little one, he said with a small smile. Mira smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. You have done more than anyone could imagine. You have shown both humans and Varnix that peace is possible. Ryan shook his head humbly. I just held a baby, that's all. Mira's eyes softened. It is never just holding a baby when hearts are involved. You changed the course of history today. Ryan glanced at the pendant around his neck, the one given by the Varnix as a symbol of peace. It glowed faintly in the dim light, a reminder that small acts of kindness could have enormous consequences. Outside, Seren 4's rivers glimmered in the moonlight, Inside, humans and Varniks now had a reason to believe in each other. And somewhere, in the quiet spaces between fear and hope, a soldier, an empress, and a child had created a bond stronger than any weapon. It was a night no one in history would forget, the night when enemies almost became family, and when the courage of one human and the innocence of a child reminded two species of the true meaning of trust. Years passed. The war that had scarred entire galaxies became a memory, but the story of one human soldier and one alien child spread far and wide. Leon, once the small baby who would not stop crying, had grown into a bright, curious child. His silver skin now shone with the soft glow of maturity, and his large eyes reflected both human warmth and Varnik's wisdom. Despite the differences in their worlds, he had learned to embrace both. Mira, the Empress of Varniks, watched her son carefully. She had never forgotten the human soldier who saved them. Ryan. That single act had not only saved lives, but had changed the course of history. Leon's calm, confident nature was a direct result of Ryan's courage and kindness. One morning, Ryan arrived at the palace on Seren 4. It was not his first visit, but each time he came, it felt strange to see how much had changed. The once wounded alien city had been rebuilt, sparkling silver under the light of the twin suns. The rivers were clear, the streets filled with life, and laughter echoed from the gardens. Leon ran toward him, arms outstretched. "Ryan," he shouted, his small voice full of excitement. Ryan knelt and scooped him up, hugging him tightly. "Look at you, little one. All grown up," Leon laughed. "I am not little anymore." Mira approached, smiling softly. "He will always see you as the one who gave him peace," she said. Ryan shook his head, brushing imaginary dust from his uniform. "I didn't give him peace. He had it inside him all along. I just held him when he needed it most." Mira's eyes glistened. "Even the smallest act of compassion can shape the future. You have proven that, Ryan. Not only to my son, but to all of us." The Peace Summit was underway. Leaders from human colonies and Varniks planets gathered to discuss trade, exploration, and shared research. For the first time in history, the two species worked together without suspicion, without fear. Ryan walked with Mira and Leon through the gardens, now fully grown and strong. "You know," he said quietly, "it's strange. I never thought a soldier like me would end up walking beside royalty like this." Mira smiled. "It is strange because you think only of rank and titles. You judge the value of life differently. That is why your kind is remarkable." Leon tugged at Ryan's hand. "Tell them story again. Tell them how I cried and you saved me." Ryan chuckled. All right. But remember, it was your fault for crying so much." The laughter of the child drew attention. Delegates from both species turned, curiosity in their eyes. Ryan told the story simply, about the battlefield, the wreckage, the cry, and the moment he held Leon. The room grew quiet as everyone listened. Even those who had once doubted humans watched in awe. A single act performed out of instinct and kindness had not only saved lives but had inspired peace. But not all were content. Even with treaties signed, there were factions on both sides who doubted the other. Some humans resented the Varniks, believing old fears had not disappeared. Some Varniks extremists still whispered about revenge, claiming trust with humans was foolish. One night, Ryan stood guard over Leon and Mira in the palace gardens. The twin moons cast soft light over the silver paths. Leon played nearby, tossing small stones into the crystal-clear water, his laughter filling the air. Ryan's scanner beeped faintly. He frowned. Someone approached the palace from the northern ridge, fast, stealthy, and armed. He motioned for Mira and Leon to move to the inner chamber. "Stay close," he whispered. Before anyone could react, two figures darted into the gardens, armed intruders from the extremists still lurking among both species. Their goal was clear: disrupt peace, capture Leon, and reignite war. Ryan didn't hesitate. He moved in front of the child, rifle raised but steady. "Not tonight," he said softly but firmly. The intruders fired. Ryan ducked behind a marble column, returning fire with precision. But his main concern wasn't just defeating them. It was keeping Leon safe. The child stood frozen, sensing Ryan's fear, yet also his courage. Ryan caught his eye. "Stay calm, little one. You'll be safe." For a moment the world seemed frozen. Two humans, two Varniks attackers, a child glowing with an unusual light in the dark garden. Then instinct took over. Ryan leapt, rolling to the side, and fired once more. One intruder fell. The other hesitated, shocked by Ryan's skill and calm. Leon cried out, not in fear but a small determined call. Ryan felt a wave of strength pass through him. Somehow the child's emotions, shaped by both Varnic's energy and human trust, gave him clarity. His shots became precise, his movements swift. Within moments the intruders were subdued. Guards arrived, taking the attackers into custody. Mira hugged Leon tightly. "You were brave," she whispered. Leon looked at Ryan wide-eyed. "I helped, didn't I?" Ryan smiled, kneeling beside him. "You were amazing. You stayed calm, and that's what mattered. We make a great team, huh?" Mira looked at Ryan, her voice soft and filled with admiration. "Your courage and heart have protected not only our son but our entire future." Ryan shook his head. "I didn't do it for fame or glory. I just did what any human should do." Mira's eyes glistened. "And that is why humanity is extraordinary." The next morning, the delegates held a final ceremony to mark the permanent peace. Leon walked beside Ryan, holding his hand proudly. The leaders spoke of treaties, trade, and cooperation, but the story that captured everyone's hearts was not about weapons, plans, or political strategy. It was about a human soldier who had held a baby in his arms, calming it when no one else could. "Sometimes," Ryan said quietly to Mira, "peace doesn't start with treaties. It starts with one simple act of kindness." Leon nodded vigorously. "One simple hug," he exclaimed, making both Ryan and Mira laugh. The Varnics and humans cheered. Cameras recorded, historians documented, and ambassadors promised that this day would never be forgotten. For the first time in centuries, humans and Varnics celebrated together, not as enemies, not as former rivals, but as allies and friends. Years later, the story of Ryan and Leon became legend. Across planets, colonies, and cities, parents told their children about the baby who would not stop crying, and the human soldier who stepped in, even the smallest. "Heart can change the universe," the story said. Ryan returned to a quiet post on another planet. Far from politics, far from fame. He worked with refugees, trained young soldiers, and occasionally received messages from Mira and Leon. But he never sought glory. One day, a young human recruit asked him, "Sir, why did you save a baby that wasn't even human?" Ryan smiled, patting the young recruit's shoulder. "Because every life matters, and because sometimes a small act of courage can change everything." On Saren 4, Mira and Leon looked toward the stars. The galaxy was still vast, still unpredictable, but hope now lived among humans and Varnics alike. Leon's laughter echoed across the palace halls, a reminder of the bond between species, a symbol of trust, and the courage of a single human heart. In the history books, the human soldier was remembered not for battles won, not for medals earned, but for a quiet moment of empathy, a moment that brought peace, saved a life, and changed the course of the galaxy. Ryan never cared about being remembered. Yet his simple act, a human holding a baby, became a story that inspired both species. That even in a universe filled with war, fear and uncertainty, compassion, courage, and empathy could shine brighter than any weapon. And somewhere in the quiet of space, stars continued to shine, a reminder that one human's heart could light up the universe.